It's time for this week's Economy Matters with Christoph Schumacher from Germany this week. So, Christoph, you're looking at our election. The countdown is on.
Yes, absolutely. And it's always a time where, of course, we are looking forward to what will happen in the new years, but it's also a time to reflect on what has happened in the last few years as well, because ultimately, if we decide to choose a party, we want to see how good the incumbent was in order to give us an idea of whether we want to go along again for the same ride or whether we want to change. So I think election time is always important for looking backwards as well.
Mm. And you've pinpointed the IMF report that's come out recently, doing a bit of a health check of the economy.
Yeah, I thought actually that the timing was quite well, that the IMF always has its experts look at each member state country and then writes quite a comprehensive report, sort of similar to a school report. They tell you what you've done well, they tell you what they think you've done not so well, and then give them advice for improvements. And that coincides, of course, nicely now with the upcoming election. So I thought by taking a closer look at the IMF report, that will give sort of an independent view of how outsiders, experts in the field who do this for many, many countries, view New Zealand. So that's why I decided to take a closer look at that report that has just been released.
Mm. And like you, they've talked about positives and negatives.
Absolutely. There was nothing in there that we don't already know. They commended the government for a great job in quickly responding to the pandemic, locking the country down, and then being very quick with financial aids afterwards to keep the economy going again. And absolutely right, New Zealand did a great job. But when the government started to open the economy again and started to kickstart it, that's where things started to go wrong. And the IMF was actually quite clear that the prolonged lockdown of our borders actually contributed and put fuel on the fire of a heating economy, simply by keeping the borders shut when all the other countries were already open for business. That created more of a supply chain shortage, and secondly, it created a labor shortage, which all fueled the already heating economy.
And you've also pinpointed the concluding paragraph, which doesn't sound too optimistic.
Absolutely. They pointed out that given that inflation is still way too high and far away from target limits, we are sitting at 6%. We want to sit sort of between the 1.3% range. They believe the OCR needs to stay up for longer. This, of course, dampens economic growth. It slows everything down. Given the cost of living crisis, the IMF actually believes we're heading for some potential instability. However, I don't quite see it in such a pessimistic way. As always, have a more positive outlook. We've just heard that in the second quarter, our economy grew by almost 1%. Now, that is not bad. We've heard that our technical recession from Q1 wasn't actually a technical recession because they have changed the value to sort of 0% growth. So it wasn't a recession at all. So given that the economy is growing again, that the economy is getting used to the higher OCR, I actually believe that New Zealand, it's not going to be an easy year, but it's not as dark as sort of the IMF put in their final concluding statement.
Why is it bad to focus too much on economic growth, having growth?
Yeah, growth is good, but we seem to be obsessed. Everything needs to be 2, 3% growth, or we are not happy. But an economy that is growing steadily at like 1% is good. I prefer a steady, slower growth than too much growth, overheating, and then the ups and downs. And if you go back sort of 10 years, New Zealand was this kind of economy. You remember when the term rock solid economy was coined. And this was actually the time where growth was not huge, but it was steady and was consistent. And I actually think we should be happy with 0.9% growth for Q2. And if we keep growing at such a similar rate, then I think that is exactly what the New Zealand economy needs.
Putting your marking hat on, how do you think Labour did over the past 3 years?
Oh, yeah, the ups and downs, probably sort of a B minus. That kind of range, I believe, keeping the economy locked up for too long created damage, and we still suffer from it. Wage rises, limitations in labor force has kept output down, and this was probably something I think the government would reconsider if they had another, if they could turn the clock back. So overall, they did some good things, definitely when the lockdown happened. Recently, it wasn't quite as strong as we might have hoped. So B minus, I think, would be
And if we do
a
some
good.
fact checking of what's been said on the campaign so far, National has accused Labour of being bad economic managers. Would you concur with that, or would you contrast that view?
Um, it's harsh to call it bad economic management because
Mm.
the government did things right as well. And it's not that easy to steer an economy. It's not a finely tuned car where a few changes here and there have quick impact. No, things take time to filter through. So yes, things could have gone better, but I wouldn't go as far as say terrible, really bad management. Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement, but it was also a tough period, having a global lockdown and pandemic. That's nothing anyone had ever experienced before. So it's always easier to point sort of at others in that context, than being in charge yourself.
Christoph Schumacher, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.